Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of exponential technologies, business innovation, entrepreneurship, thought leadership, enterprise IT security, neuroscience, philosophy, personal development, and more. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is Bill Murphy, your host of the Red Zone podcast. Today, we're going to talk about privacy. And I find this really interesting. I find it really interesting that GDPR was founded over in Europe. So, I thought the real bastion of individual freedoms, protections was the United States. I didn't realize that this was Europe. So it's really interesting that GDPR is the next thing from a privacy perspective that's kind of hitting security coming up here. And I have been searching for a couple of years now to find really innovative privacy leaders. And I reached out to Ann about 2 years ago, and we finally connected, ironically, right before GDPR is being launched here in 2018. Now, who is Dr. Anne Cavoukian? I'm going to give you some of her numerous awards, just a kind of summary here. She has received numerous awards recognizing her leadership in privacy, included being named as the top 25 women of influence in Canada, among the top 10 women in data security and privacy, one of the Power 50 by Canadian Business, is named the top 100 leaders in identity, and was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal by Governor General of Canada. So why? Because Dr. Kevorkian was served as an unprecedented 3 terms as the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, Canada. She created Privacy by Design. This is the thing. She created Privacy by Design, which is baked now into GDPR. And PBD, or Privacy by Design, is a framework that seeks to proactively embed privacy into the design specs of information technologies, network infrastructure, and business practices, thereby achieving the strongest protection possible. And in 2010, the international privacy regulators unanimously passed a resolution recognizing Privacy by Design as an international standard. Since then, it's been translated into 40 languages. The reason I read that is I want you to know who you're listening to today. And normally, I would not be a proponent of another regulation, but I like this one. I like it because it hits privacy and hits freedom and freedom of the individual. I think it's going to force security into respecting the individual right, which I think is the foundation of our liberty, foundation of our society. And I don't think it's a mystery that blockchain, AI are coming online right at this time. I think what we're going to see over the next couple of years, starting in 2018, is technologies and regulations that are requiring a respect of the human being's freedom. And I think this is going to be an advantage for businesses. I think businesses that tackle this and establish trust in a world that is going fast, going digital, it's going to require that we build our security frameworks so that they are portable, nimble. I think they have to respect them. They must respect the human being. And it's going to require us to rethink and re-architect. Now, and I said this to Ann during the interview. I said, if the FBI needs a warrant quickly, then they just ask for it quickly. Like the process just moves faster. And the same thing with security. I think if the business is moving quickly, instead of security moving and privacy moving at the speed of a glacier, it will be required to move quickly. And I think this is where we're going to see big impact here in the next couple of years. Also, we mentioned a couple companies that can help you through this process. My company, yours truly, and my team can also facilitate that as well by going to privacy@redzonetech.net. Again, privacy@redzonetech.net. But in this interview, there's going to be some suggestions, places you can go, websites you can go to see and explore Privacy by Design. So with no more further introduction needed, I wanted to introduce you to my wonderful interview with Dr. Anne Cavoukian. Thank you. Well, Anne, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you very much.
So I think one of the biggest pieces about, I've actually been tracking you for a couple of years in your work. And so one of the
Thank
things,
you, Bill.
I mean, I think you've been in the forefront for many years, and it's taken a while, in particular, since a lot of my listeners in the United States is a little bit slow to the party here with privacy. And I'd love to get your thoughts on the journey that you've been on and just a little bit about your origin story. Like, how did that all get started for you and bring us right up to where we are today?
Previously, I was the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, Canada, and for a long time, 3 terms, almost 20 years. And during that time, I developed something called Privacy by Design in the late 90s, but it really took off after 9/11. And the 2 reasons why I did that. First of all, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a psychologist. So most regulators, most commissioners are what I call lawyers. They love drilling down into Section 29, Sub 3, Part A, and applying that to the fact situations and getting a resolution, which is very important. But in this day and age of massive ubiquitous computing power, social media abounding, connected devices, and IoT, it was just no longer possible to rely on regulatory compliance after the fact. We needed something proactive. I wanted to prevent the privacy harms from arising, the data breaches. So I wanted a model of prevention, which would apply proactively before, and you could embed the much needed protections into the design of your technologies, into your policies, your procedures, bake it into the data architecture. So this model of prevention, much like a medical model of prevention, is what I came up with in terms of privacy by design. And there are 7 foundational principles to privacy by design, which form the absolute base, the foundation of your operations. And your actual policy and program could look 100 different ways as long as it reflects these essentials. And that's how I came to it, as I said, long time ago. But in 2010, it was unanimously passed as an international standard, privacy by design, by the International Assembly of Data Protection Commissioners and Privacy Commissioners. And then it's just been taking off. And when we get to talking about the GDPR, that's another exciting development. So this is what brought me to it. See, privacy forms the foundation of our freedom. If you value freedom, then you value privacy, because you cannot have freedom without privacy. Privacy also fuels innovation and creativity. I always say it breeds innovation, because you got to be really smart to do privacy and other interests like security, like data utility, data analytics, you name it. You have to have both.
I do love how you talk about freedom, because I am not, and not many folks in the US are, well, that's not necessarily true. Not many entrepreneurs are about for a lot of government oversight of anything. But what I am a big proponent of is privacy, because I think that comes to a lot of the founding principles that the country is founded on. And I think that the technology, because the internet is really not that old. I mean, and really the real internet started in 95, which is, so it's like, I'm not sure. I know most of the general population just really doesn't know what happens behind the scenes in regards to privacy. So I love that GDPR is coming online right now, because I think it's a big wake-up call for the U.S. And I think it's going to coerce companies into actually taking privacy seriously.
Yes. Well, it's going to be such a game changer. The General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, is literally flips everything on its head. So first of all, it's one overarching law that will apply to all of the 28 member countries of the EU. They will have to replace their existing privacy laws with the GDPR and develop laws that are compliant with it. But the other thing is, for the first time ever, the GDPR actually has privacy by design in it, and privacy as the default, which is the second foundational principle of privacy by design. So for me, that is so exciting. But for everyone, it's exciting because it's going to be the exact opposite of what's happening now. See, right now, you give your information to a company to use for a particular purpose, but if you want them not to use it for any other purposes, you have to wade through the terms of service and all the legalese and the privacy policy to find the opt-out box that says, do not use my information for any purpose other than the primary purpose of the data collection, which is why I gave you that information. But we know nobody has the time to go through the terms of service and the privacy policy. Nobody does that. But it doesn't mean they don't want privacy. concern for privacy is at the highest I've ever seen in all the over 20 years I've been doing this. It's at the 92% of the population very concerned about privacy and concerned for the loss of control over their personal data. So this is huge. The game changer is going to be once the GDPR comes into effect in May. Privacy as the default says you, the company or the business or the government department, you cannot use my information for any purpose other than the primary purpose of the data collection. That's all you're allowed to do. And if you want to use it for some secondary use down the road, you have to come back to the data subject and obtain their positive consent. That is the biggest game changer. It flips, goes from black to white. And that's why companies are just reeling over this.
Yeah, and one of the things what's really been interesting is that I was sitting down with a gentleman the other day, and we were looking through his NIST review. He had and he was a smaller, well, not small, but 350 person insurance company. So not an insignificant company that they have to abide by some pretty stringent standards. And he's looking at this report, and it's basically useless for him because it gives him no place to start. It just basically checks off a bunch of boxes of what he's got wrong and right. And it's a cursory kind of overview. And it doesn't actually tell him how to fix or how to do it or how to do it cost effectively. And so my biggest concern with all of these regulations imposed is how do you actually take action? How do you take positive action on it? Because there's a lot of companies out there and there's a lot of complexity with security.
Of course. And I don't want to be unsympathetic to these companies, but here's why the regulators in the EU are going to be unsympathetic. Because they've said, look, you've had 5 years to prepare for this. They take their time in introducing new legislation in the EU, literally 5 years. I think over 5 years. So this was introduced initially in 2012. And the reason they take so much time is because they really want to be fair and give people a chance to ramp up and, they don't want to just spring it on them. But with due respect, 5 years is a long time, and they shouldn't just be waking up to this now. Having said that, most companies are just waking up to it now and, freaking out over what are we going to do about this. There are a lot of organizations, TrustArc and others, who are offering primers on what to do. Nimity is offering it too. Lots of companies in terms of trying to make it simple. The ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK, has a document you can get from their website, a 10-step here, do these 10 things. This is where you should start with trying to become compliant with the GDPR. So there are tools out there available to companies as well as companies who are offering services on training others. So I think you can get the help you need. One obvious place to start is Privacy by Design. You can get that on my website. As I said, I developed this years ago, but it really took off actually after 9/11. Because the essence of Privacy by Design is you have to be proactive, embed the much needed protections upfront into your operations, and also get rid of the zero-sum mindset of either or. You can have privacy versus security, privacy versus data analytics. That's nonsense. That either-or proposition of one or the other. It's a win-lose model, and it is so yesterday. Get rid of that and substitute positive sum models. Positive sum just means you can have two doubly enabling programs in place that complement each other and that can both gain at the same time. And that's why, I always say have privacy and security embedded into your operations. You have to have both. Even though the term privacy subsumes a much broader set of protections than security alone. In this day and age of massive daily cybersecurity attacks, if you don't have security, you're not going to have any privacy. So these are some of the basics. Get rid of zero-sum models and get proactive. Get ahead of the harm. Try to prevent it from happening.
So getting rid of a zero-sum model means basically trying to choose between one or the other, security or privacy. And basically what you're saying is embed both so you don't have to play either or. Is that what you're referring to? Okay.
Exactly. It's the either-or win-lose model that's what's going to tank our operations. You have to have both, and you can and must have both. Let's do it. So that's one of the driving forces of this.
I know I run an enterprise CIO innovation series that meets every 6 to 8 weeks, and I break it into offense and defense innovation. And I believe that we're going to need to innovate in defense. And I think defense is going to become the new offense. Like, I think that
Yes.
companies that have
Yes.
a really strong defense, meaning they really can let their customers know that they're actually being good stewards of the data, that can become the new offense.
I couldn't agree more. If you have a solid defense in place, so you have measures in place that will defend your operations from the onslaught of cybersecurity attacks and misappropriations of personal data for unauthorized uses by unknown third parties. If you have that in place, then you don't have to worry so much about the offensive because you'll be in a really good position to move forward from there. So much of this is getting ahead of the game, getting ahead of the harm. And if you do that, I always tell companies, don't keep it to yourself. Shout it from the rooftops. Tell your customers the lengths you're going to protect their privacy. And that will increase trust, which is at an all-time low right now. It will increase trust and loyalty dramatically on the part of your customers.
Now, from your principles, your privacy by design principles, and there's clearly a way to drive costs down. Like we're often approached by companies that are about to launch. They call us when they have a beta of their app that's being released, and all of a sudden we look into the back end of that app and find that all sorts of people and personal data and everything's being put into that app. Now, good thing that there is a beta, so they're not fully released, but it's certainly more cost effective to bake privacy and security into at the beginning of this process. But what companies do?
But you're absolutely right. I'll never forget years ago when I was commissioner, it was smart meters were mandated in my jurisdiction by law. So every house had to have a smart meter attached to it. And a lot of people were concerned about that because wirelessly this information is being communicated about, when you get up, when you go to sleep, what amount of TV you watch can be inferred. This can be very privacy invasive. So I went to my premier and I said, look, you've passed the law. There's nothing I can do about it. Do you authorize me to build the strongest privacy protections into this? And he said, absolutely, be my guest. So we did. We worked with all the energy companies and the power companies to develop the strongest technologies around smart meters in terms of encrypting the wireless communications that were being sent out, et cetera. And I remember a short while after that, and we published 6-7 papers on this, and we were contacted by San Diego Gas and Electric, who at the time in California, it wasn't mandated by law that smart meters should be attached to all houses, but a lot of the companies wanted to do this. Gas and electric companies wanted to do this for efficiency and better service, but they were getting a lot of pushback. I remember they gave me this one story that their trucks were going into one neighborhood to install the smart meters, and they were blocked from entering the neighborhood because the residents of that community drove their cars up to the front to block the entry of these trucks. There was a lot of concern about privacy and other issues, so they came down and they approached me and they said, would you come and talk to our board or CEO, et cetera? I said, of course. I made my pitch and what we'd done here in Ontario. And at the end, I remember one of the senior executives saying to me, well, young lady, you've made a good case. Now, what's it going to cost me? And I said to him, sir, with due respect, you're asking the wrong question. You should be asking, what's it going to save me? Because I can assure you, while there's a small cost involved, obviously, of doing this up front, it will be the fraction of the cost you will incur when you start getting data breaches and privacy infractions, which I assure you will be getting. And those, when there's a data breach now, it's not just a lawsuit that's launched, it's a class action lawsuit. But the loss to your brand and to your reputation may be irreparable. So they signed on and they didn't have any problems. And I also said, if you do this, meet with your customers, explain to them the lengths you're going to protect their privacy and how you will restrict your use of the information to the intended purpose, etc. Shout it from the rooftops that you're doing this.
So what are you finding is, out of your 7 principles, your privacy by design principles, what are you finding the one that's most resonating with everybody? Which one or two you find is most resonant?
I won't say it's the most resonant, but the second principle, privacy is the default, is the biggest game changer because it's the exact opposite of what people are doing now. Right now, privacy is not offered automatically without the customer asking for it. Privacy is the default. It builds it in right from the beginning. But I think maybe the sixth and seventh principles would resonate most. The sixth principle is transparency. You tell customers, governments, the information you have in your possession that you've collected from your customers or citizens, you may have custody and control of that information, but it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the data subject, the individuals from whom you collected the information. So give them a right of access to your information and make sure they can see what you have. That transparency is not only good for them, it's good for you, because you will never know if your information is 100% accurate or not. The data subject will bring to your attention mistakes that he or she notices. And we found this again and again. It's a big help to companies to have data subjects actually access their data, because it enhances the accuracy and the quality of the data. So even though that resonates with individuals because it's their data and they can access it, it also resonates with companies because it increases the quality, the accuracy of their information. It becomes a real win-win.
I wonder if ultimately there's going to be a data broker, like a master data broker or a couple data brokers that are going to essentially be like a wallet for your identity and for your privacy, that you're going to be able to hand that wallet out to Amazon for certain things, to your home mortgage for certain things, to a company that you want to be marketed and receive information for certain things for your employer. Do you ever see that happening in the future?
The only problem with that is then you have to trust that data broker. And I'll just point you to what happened with Equifax a couple of months ago, a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember. They had a massive data breach, and they just, in fact, revealed that it's much larger than they had originally reported. And they were just weak on their security. They didn't do an upgrade that they should have done immediately. So I'm very nervous with entrusting my information to groups like that. What I would much rather have, something in the works, it's called smart data. And this is a technology that will hopefully develop in the near future. But basically, the data itself will be entrusted with the permissible uses of that data. And so that data could be floating around in the ethers, in the cloud, wherever. A company can only access it for the uses permitted that is encoded into the data itself. And then, if the company wants to use it for some unauthorized purpose, the data will effectively self-destruct for that unauthorized purpose. These are just examples. We're going to see lots of this kind of stuff with artificial intelligence and neural networks. We want to embed privacy upfront into these emerging technologies because I think that's what will have the greatest bang for our buck.
I actually think that blockchain will be a huge win because essentially someone's going to build an app that'll sit on top of blockchain. And it's probably no secret that this technology, blockchain, is coming online in a practical way right about the time we need this.
Yes, and there are companies like Enigma that came out of MIT, I think they're based in California now, that actually promise 100% privacy with blockchain, which is fabulous because blockchain is primarily a pseudonymous venture, but some information may at times be accessed if there are problems, but that they're taking that to even further levels like Enigma. So I think it's very promising.
So I think I stopped you. You talked about transparency on your sixth principle and right of access. Did you say seventh was important as well?
The seventh principle is keep it user-centric. Focus on the user. If you start with the user as the central hub of what you're doing, the rest, everything flows from that. Keeping it user-centric is absolutely essential.
Which is basically back to the foundations of freedom inherent in the whole democracy to begin with.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And let me tell you, it's no accident that Germany is the leading privacy and data protection country in the world. It's no accident they had to endure the complete loss of all of their privacy and all of their freedom during the Third Reich. And when that ended, they literally said, never again will we allow such outright surveillance and access to our personal information and our total loss of freedom. I've been to many conferences in Germany. Every conference has started with a reference to that time. And they mean it. They are head and shoulders above other countries. They have not forgotten, nor will they.
So one of the questions I thought we'd talk about is the International Council on Global Privacy and Security. Maybe you can just let the audience know about that and sort of your role in it.
Whenever there's an increase in terrorist incidents, dating back to Charlie Hebdo, Manchester, San Bernardino, London, Paris, the pendulum swings right back to forget about privacy, we need public safety, security. Of course we do, but not to the exclusion of privacy and our freedom. So last year, one of my colleagues, called me and said something like, Cavoukian, get off your duff and organize some kind of international council. You've got a lot of international contacts from the time you were commissioner. We need to get attention to this, that you can have both privacy and security at the same time. We've got to rid the world of the zero-sum either-or model. So I said, okay, I try to be agreeable. And I formed this international council I'm calling Global Privacy and Security by Design, just to highlight that. And we have the most amazing founding members. So Michael Chertoff, he's the Second Secretary of Homeland Security in the U.S. Darren Entwistle is the CEO of TELUS, one of our major telcos here in Canada. Jill de Kerchhoff, he is the Director of Counterterrorism in the EU. So I've got both privacy and security types. Greg Wolfond, he's the CEO of SecureKey, an amazing company that delivers privacy and security in a double-blind manner. So all of these amazing founding members who are forming my board, I wanted to get them to demonstrate that you can have both privacy and security types who both believe you have to have both of them, not one to the exclusion of the other. We just had our first fundraiser gala where all the funds raised were purely to go to research in emerging technologies and how you build this in. And it was a huge success. It was sold out. Everybody was there. Microsoft, Google, Deloitte, KPMG, PwC, you name it. All the big companies were there. And I think it just resonated with the success of the idea that you can have and must have privacy and security. And if I can refer anyone who's listening to this, if you'd like to go to the website, it's just GPS, S as in Sam, GPS by design, all one word, .org. And if you take a look at it, I'd love you to join. There's no cost to joining. It'll just show an agreement with the philosophy of we must have both privacy and security, or privacy and data analytics. You name it. We can do this in a positive sum manner.
So there's a theme developing. This is this positive sum manner in which you're saying, listen, we're not going to do this, one versus the other. It's right. We're all in on this. And so I'm going to put your website, of course, and then I'm going to put also you referenced Privacy by Design and all the companies that we've mentioned, like Enigma, Anonymity, TrustArch. Right. I see. I'm going to put them all. TrustArch, yeah. Great. Just so people can reference them.
I would love that. Thank you.
Now, is there anything that's on your radar that any message that you can see for the decision makers that are out there? So one of the things you had mentioned, when I mentioned the NIST piece, because let me just frame this. A lot of the decision makers for enterprise and business have to look at frameworks, or they are looking at frameworks, and we're buried with frameworks, with NIST, with GDPR, with PCI, with HIPAA, right. The CFO has the advantage because they just have GAAP accounting principles and AI CPA standards, and so we have all these frameworks that on the security side. So where does and GDPR frameworks will be coming out pretty soon as well.
Right.
So where does one start? What's a good start for someone that is concerned about what you're referring to?
Honestly, I would start with Privacy by Design, the 7 foundational principles. They're really straightforward. And since Privacy by Design is now part of the GDPR, that will also help you. The other thing I just wanted to mention, the theme of privacy is good for business. People are often surprised when I say that because, they think, privacy stifles innovation and creativity. As I've said, it does the exact opposite. It builds, breeds innovation, and it builds trust. Trust is at an all-time low right now. 90% of the public is distrustful of both governments and private sector entities collecting information. They're very, very concerned. So if you want to build trust, you want to build loyalty, use privacy to your advantage. Gain a competitive advantage by telling your customers the lengths you're going to build trust and to protect their privacy, that you have great respect for them. This will preserve the customers you have, and it will attract new opportunity. It's so important, and it's in the spirit of transparency as well, that you're telling them what you're doing. And I think it just goes such a long way to building what is lacking now, which is trusted business relationships. We've got to build this up from the bottom up. We're at, I've never seen online research, like Pew Internet Research polls, at a high of 90%. They're regularly in the 90 percentile now, ever since Edward Snowden's revelations. 90%, 92% of the population being very distrustful of anyone collecting their personal information, government or business. And they're fearful because they feel they've lost all control and they don't know what to do about it. You can turn that around by talking to your customers, telling them the lengths you go to protect their privacy, respect their privacy, and that you want to work with them. I found that when you do that, and then you want to use their information for a secondary use, if you have that trusted business relationship, customers are happy to allow you to use it for additional purposes. What they don't want is their information being shared with unknown third parties, and they have no idea what the third party is going to do with their information. That's where they want the walls to go up.
Yeah, and that's super practical. I mean, I just had someone the other day, and they, there's several millions and millions of dollars being made in different sources, and they have to make hard decisions. They're using email addresses being collected to farm out to other services, and they're making $100,000-$200,000 a year in these kind of ancillary income sources, and they're going to have to shut those down because they don't have the permission.
Yeah.
And so this is real and practical. Well,
and with the GDPR, so we should add that if you are found to be breaching the GDPR, the penalties that can be levied are enormous. 4% of global revenues can be charged. Imagine 4% of Google or Facebook. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars here.
4% of global revenues.
Yes.
Holy mackerel.
Holy mackerel, exactly. So let's get up to speed and raise privacy.
I just think that, security has always gone slowly. And I think this is also another interesting thing is that with innovation on offense, the offense is playing offense and is trying to go quickly to market. And one of the interesting pieces, which I'm really interested in seeing over the next 5 years, is how defense can change so that actually we bake privacy and security in, but that it is more fluid and can actually morph and change, not the level or standard change, but it's able to morph and change with changes to the business without constantly breaking and cracking the foundational principle. So the FBI wants, in normal cases, if the FBI wants to go and get information, they need a warrant. They need a warrant, but even if they want to go fast, they need a warrant. But then they just need a warrant faster. So it's not that they break that they got a warrant.
And you can get warrants online now. So it's nonsense that this stuff takes forever to get. That's no longer the case.
Yeah. So I think that's the challenge that's going to speed things up for business. Well,
agreed.
And I am so happy you came on, and this is such a privilege for someone like you to come on our show and share your wisdom and your hard work over the years. It's, I believe, paying off in spades. And
you're very kind. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to do this.
Great. And I'll make sure all your material's online. And is any other things that you want to share with the audience, or do you feel like we've learned your major thesis?
I think you have, but I always like to remind people at the end that privacy is all about freedom. If you value your freedom, then you value your privacy. Fight for it.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate you for your time today.
Many thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.